Hi, James Farr here. The previously recorded episodes that you're about to see are a series of critical and uncomfortable conversations that I've had with law enforcement long before the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and right here in Pasadena, Anthony McClain most recently. There was J.R. Thomas and Kendrick McDade. I invite you to take a look at this series of conversations and comment below.
So at the end of the day, getting back to the recruiting effort, 13% of my workforce are African Americans. I have African Americans, men and women, in the highest levels of the organization. Those are sworn and non-sworn employees. A larger number is Latino, and we're growing. We want to grow. We're very proud of our diversity. 31% of our workforce are women, as we continue to compete with every other department. Statewide or out of the state for qualified men and women. From the state of Black Pasadena, James, I got 9 referrals, 9 names of young men and women that are interested in being a Pasadena police officer. And we talked about those. We talked to those individuals so far. And I would say I recruited another 3 individuals at the Black History Parade. And so while I respect that people are let go, for performance and those kinds of things, I think there's something trending here, and I think my message is: send me your young people, send me your aunt, your nephew, or your niece, or your son or your daughter that is of that age. Mr. Goodman said at the state of Black Pasadena, you can earn $19,000 as a high school education as a construction worker. You can make $78,000 as a Pasadena police officer with full benefits and enjoy a 30-year career serving the community that you love and and you can help me change policing from the inside out.
But again, that's what I'm saying. I really just gotta wonder: are you really in touch with the pulse of how people feel?
I think so.
I don't.
I think so. I spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time in the community, and I have some pretty honest discussions.
No, I don't doubt that.
Pretty honest discussions with young people, with people that are disenfranchised. Intimate groups like this, or speaking to a larger audience through social media. I go to a lot of churches. I talk to a lot of folks. And look at. I will say again, imperfect workforce. There's no doubt about that. Do I understand the urgency of my community? You're damn right I do. I understand it.
But most people, through some of the groups and things, there's this sentiment that there's lack of the transparency. And again, you doing this is certainly a show of transparency and willing to have open conversation. But in terms of when it comes back to, the department investigating itself and people feeling comfortable with the process, with your former attaché who's now on administrative leave pending an investigation, how long do these things take? And so you mentioned earlier about getting guns off the street. Right. And people may feel like if it's not explained or understood, some of them suggested that, oh God, he's
James, I got to tell you, and I think I can say this, with passion and pure heart. Nobody's as frustrated as I am about the length of some of these investigations, particularly in the federal arena. I have no control. I'm on the sidelines watching either the AUSA or some other federal agency look at an employee for their conduct, and everybody's asking, well, Chief, how long is this going to take? And I asked the federal government, how long is this going to take? And when I'm counseled by our federal partners about running a parallel investigation might endanger their investigation, then we have fully cooperated from the very beginning of that investigation, and I hope that it'll be soon. But I can tell you this, conclude soon, that once it is concluded, whether they decide to move forward on formal charges or not, I'm prepared to move quickly on the internal affairs process. Now that thinking is evolving. The past thinking has been, let's wait and watch and see what the prosecutorial agency decides. But that That builds frustration. It builds angst. It builds mistrust. It perpetuates this thing about you're circling the wagons and stuff like that. None of that, from my perspective, none of that is true. And while I deeply appreciate the concerns of my community, you have my firm commitment that I will investigate that case rapidly once I get the clearance to do so, so that we can move very quickly.
We understand
James.
due process, but doesn't it? I mean, it doesn't strike you as odd that most people who work, most of your constituents, if you will, are not afforded the luxury of sitting at home with a very nice salary, and while the rest of people are getting up, going to work, when what appears as though, as you talk about the guns that are removed from the street, is that these guns are being sold by the officer. Don't you see how that narrative kind of plays out? And when we sitting at the barber shop and or at the coffee shop or in different places, and somebody is saying, well, Chief, how many guns did he need? I mean, you had to sign off on them. I mean, so it kind of feels like.
Right. So just for the audience and clarity to that, I think you're kind of flirting around with a little bit of a case, again, that's under federal review right now. So I have to be a little cautious on this, and I want to be transparent as well. So let me talk in hypotheticals. The letters that you referred to typically were called the 10-day gun letter. And a 10-day gun letter would be a letter that I would sign, and it would say, Officer James Farr is buying this gun, and then serial number 123 for himself or professional use, not intended for resale. It says that right on the letter. Now, the only time you would need a letter like that would be to waive the 10-day gun background period, because the assumption is you're a law enforcement officer. I do check to see if you've been arrested for domestic violence, but I would know that anyway, or that you've violated the law, but I would know that anyway. But I do that anyway. I do that check. So if you ask for a letter, I do that check. It's important to know for the audience, I've suspended that program. So I've not issued a gun letter for more than a year now in that regard. I would say, though, it does not preclude anybody, any police officer, Pasadena or otherwise, to go buy that same gun without a gun letter and just to wait to the 10 days and then pick the gun up. And I would never know the gun had been purchased by that person. Whether it was an on-roster or off-roster gun, a law enforcement officer can make that purchase and go about their business. So I think that when you say how many guns is too many guns, I don't know that answer. I mean, I have my own personal kind of sense of that, for my own safety or for my own viewpoint on that. But professionally speaking, I don't know how many is too many guns. But the question is whether or not, were the guns purchased legally? I'll find that out. Were they sold legally? I'll find that out. But I have to wait until the federal government decides what they're going to do. And, I've been told. And
that's what people don't understand is you don't want to interfere with their investigation. They're doing what they're doing. But why not just terminate the guy? I mean, because
he has to. Well, again, we're talking broadly. We're not talking about a specific person, but any person in that situation, James. And it sounds like a broken record, and I apologize to you, and I apologize to the audience. But at the end of the day, that employee that is under review, or any employee that's under review, has due process rights. It makes no sense. I get it. The guy that wakes up, or the father, the mother, the caretaker, the average person wakes up in the morning. They go to work, they break their back for 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 hours or whatever it is. They come home, they visit with their family, they're engaged with all kinds of stuff. If they have children, they're helping them rear them, and they sit down on the couch and they go, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?" Joe Schmo that was arrested, or the Joe Schmo that was put off leave from San Diego County, from LA County, from Fresno County is still on leave. I'm as frustrated as I suspect your viewers are in that regard. All I can say is that we will move forward quickly when the federal government decides, what it's going to do. Where I wouldn't want to be, James, and I don't think your viewers would want me to be here either, where I wouldn't want to be is that the federal agency says, "Oh yeah, I would have prosecuted James, but for the meddling of Chief Sanchez and the Pasadena Police Department, or Chief Smith and the XYZ Police Department. But for their interaction, I would have had a prosecution on that employee. And I think that the chief was doing that on purpose to safeguard his employee. I don't want to be there.
Okay, so, but it's not because, any pressure that you may too be looked at as a result of you agreeing with or signing off on that 10-day?
Well, I think the 10-day letter is codified in law. Any agency is allowed to provide that letter to a duly sworn police officer. As I had indicated earlier, I've suspended that program. In fact, what I've told my officers, if because of the potential abuse, if you want a gun that bad and you need a gun that bad, then go buy the gun like any other citizen would buy it and wait the 10 days and get the gun that you've purchased.
Okay. Do you feel that there's a need for a citizens oversight commission of the police department?
I listen to, a lot of that dialogue. I read a lot of information about citizens oversight, James. NACO, which is the National Association of Civilian Oversight Association, I think they did a study a few years ago, and what they found out in that study, as I recall, is that most civilian oversight groups end up being easier on the officer than the department was itself. So in the aggregate, the discipline or whatever it is, the accountability is stricter with the agency or the chief or the sheriff than it is with civilian oversight. I think, though, and I'm looking at an advisory commission, because I think that time has come for us, where we'll have members of our community who sit down and be able to provide input and help me, determine the appropriate direction for the department, so that we have direct input to the chief.
In that same context, not an advisory committee, but a commission that actually has some teeth, some jurisdictional and authoritative type.
There's been a lot of dialogue about that recently, and I think that there are a few commissions in California, particularly with the larger sheriff's departments or the larger municipalities and stuff like that, that have, that kind of authority and stuff for subpoena power, I think, is what's been thrown around and all. You might remember it wasn't that long ago that the city actually embarked on a review of civilian oversight. We had two outside consultants, one from Oregon, as I recall, and one from San Jose, who was formerly the ombudsperson for the city of San Jose Police Department in that role as an overseer or an auditor. And during that review, as I recall, the two consultants couldn't firmly land on a recommendation for an oversight. And I think there's some reasons for that, James. I think that despite how long it takes, despite the frustration from our community, despite my own frustration in some of the cases broadly that we've talked about, but nothing specific about any employee currently under review, or employees, plural, under a review. Despite those kinds of frustrations, despite the challenges that we have, I think by and large, the Pasadena Police Department does it pretty good. I will say again, imperfect. There's no doubt about that. Striving for to maintain, to earn and maintain trust daily, striving for daily. We'll do 100 great things, and we'll backslide because we did one thing that was bonehead. And I understand that kind of thing. But I think at the end of the day, the culture of accountability in the organization is very robust. I would turn back to the use of force or the IA reviews, and your viewers can see all that online. The numerous people. Last year, I think, James, we had, I want to say we had close to 25 or 25 personnel complaints. 50% of those complaints came from inside the department. We generated complaints on ourselves because of the
Are complaints up now?
No, they're not. They're not. They run steady. About 50 a year is what we see, and 50% of those, James, and this is all information online. 50% of those are traffic accidents.
So you're saying that complaints against the officers are down? Because when I spoke with Vice Mayor John Kennedy, he suggested that complaints are down, because of the use of body-worn cameras. And so you're saying now that they're down, when
I talked to the vice mayor. Vice Mayor Kennedy had asked me that very question at our last public safety committee. He wanted to know the empirical data. Is there empirical data that suggests that because of the body-worn cameras, and I have one off camera now, but if I may, this is the body-worn camera that we use. It's an Axion camera.
But are
so I don't know. The truth of the matter is we're doing the analysis on that, James, and we're going to go back to Vice Mayor Kennedy and Mr. Hampton, Mayor Tornick, and Council Member Madison, who comprise the Public Safety Committee. We're due for a report on that.
But I know there have been citizens groups who have organized and collected. Because again, the sentiment of what many of your constituents are feeling, that have, she's personally turned in, 50 contact forms against and that's correct terminology. It's not a complaint form. It's a contact form.
I think
right?
that's the term. Yes, sir.
Okay. And so she's turned in, dozens of these contact forms and well over 50, certainly within the last month or so. So have those not been recorded, or is it?
Yeah, those. In fact, I received an email last night from one of our community members, and there was a veritable plethora of people on the CC list. You might have been on there. I'm not sure, but I think that that person is outlining all these folks who are concerned. And as I recall, the folks that were listed on the concern with respect to one complaint, they're not the complainants. They're a party of concern with respect to the complaint.
Sure. I mean, they're making a complaint via a contact form on behalf of conduct that they saw of the officers. Right?
Yeah. So that would be, it'd be kin to you and I watching a video and saying something like, "Oh, that's ridiculous," and then writing a letter and sending the letter to that entity and saying, "We saw something that was ridiculous. We want you to know that we're concerned." Yeah, we note those concerns. I think that this person's perception is that we're trying to hide or otherwise not disclose. All those have been documented. It's one complaint against the officers, and then there are many people who are concerned about that complaint. It's not 50 complaints about the one incident. So we have a very robust system, James. It's called IA Pro for your viewers. You can Google that. But it's an electronic tracking mechanism that allows us to know how many complaints are made against the officers, how frequently they're made, all those other kinds of things as part of a review process. There's no smoke and mirrors here. Everything is above board. I share what I can share within the confines of the law. I am committed to transparency. I also am committed, though, to the due process rights of the officers as well. And I know it's easy for us and almost natural for us to jump to one conclusion or another based on what we saw. Video of an incident, independent or police or otherwise, doesn't tell the whole story. It's a portion of that story. But at the end of the day, it is something that is used to help tell the story in totality. Were the officers correct? Were they behaving? Those kinds of things. Back to your initial question, which I think about the body-worn camera. Anecdotally, I would say that the body-worn camera has probably impacted the way that my officer and my citizen or my community member and the officer interact. Because I'm looking at a body-worn camera on your chest, presumably I'm not going to read you the riot act, right? Because I don't want that to be seen on video. But you might be surprised, James, the number of people on body-worn camera that really embarrass themselves, unfortunately, on a traffic stop.
I think it certainly, we've seen too many examples of it going both ways.
Yeah, amen to that, right? And even some of my officers, I will tell you, sadly, some of my officers of color that have made stops. You talk about vile and hurtful language that my community member is saying to the officer.
But you know what? That's the job. Right?
I don't think so. I can't go with you on that one.
People lie.
Yeah. Well, that might be true, James. That might be true. Fabricating information or pontificating about use of force or those kinds of things from the dais or other places, public speaking places or whatever. I think that's one issue. But to say hurtful things.
Shut the fuck up, dummy.
Yeah. Well,
shut the fuck up, dummy.
So I think,
that is probably about one of the most dehumanizing ways.
You're referencing a case that we'll take a look at. But let's apply that language now to the person who the Pasadena police officer has stopped. And now that is the person that's talking. So all I'm saying is the body worn, and you know what? And I got to tell you, James, it's not my job. It's not my job to suffer the slings and arrows of profane or cultural or slang, whatever the word is, towards me or towards my. No, we're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to do that. So we're supposed to be professional. We're supposed to have broad shoulders. There is a limit to that. You don't get to be in my face. You don't get to push me around. You don't get to beat down on me. You don't get to do those things.
But we're not in this situation. The contact was initiated.
Just add a full disclosure. It's not Phil Sanchez that says that. It's the California Penal Code. It's the Constitution that says that. So I think your original question through Mr. Kennedy was the body worn camera making a difference? I think it is. I think it is making a difference, James. I think for the first time in a long time, it's put police officers in the community we serve on equal footing. Everybody's accountable to that perception and that data based on that device.
But certainly the family of J.R. Thomas would feel a little bit differently. I mean, they still have not. No one really knows what's happened.
James, you keep bringing up cases that are under review. How are we supposed to have a meaningful dialogue when you bring those up? And I can't talk about them. I mean, those were the ground rules coming in. So it misrepresents my willingness to engage you or engage the audience as well. The truth is that Christopher Ballou, Mr. Jenkins, and Mr. Thomas are all under review. I can't talk about that. So I think it's a little disingenuous.
Well, no, I don't think it's disingenuous. I think we're really trying to just give you an opportunity to
give me an opportunity to speak on a case that I can't speak about.
Well, I mean, specifics. We can talk generalities about surroundings, and I know we have certainly maxed our time and then some, and so it was intended to be, like I said, an authentic conversation with hopefully some understanding,
Absolutely.
So I understand.
As you start to wrap up your remarks, James, I just want to say again to you and to your viewers, and I would say to your viewers, this is not the first time James and I have had the opportunity to dialogue in a public forum, and I
Sure. very
much appreciate that. I think that you might not agree with my policies, might agree with me. You might think that I'm, a great leader. You might think that I'm a terrible leader. You might think that I hold my people accountable. You might think that, I turn a blind eye. But at the end of the day, I think the one thing that you can't say is that I don't shelter in place. I don't hide when there are these, horrific incidents that occur in our community, because I think that's what a leader's supposed to do, is come out and be present, be accessible to you and to my community. This is not, although this is the first taped interview, this is not the first time that I've dialogued about terms in general, and I'll continue to do that. A couple of things just quickly. We do have a work plan that's in place that we're going to be rolling out so that we can get more training to the officers in general about implicit bias, about respect, about culture diversity, about gender diversity, about learning those kinds of things. That's called principle-based policing. We start that next month, and then March, April, May, and we should have our officers completely and employees trained by that. But it's not going to stop there. We're also engaging the Western Justice Center for community dialogue. So what I see in my mind is a real discussion like this with police officers and with our community in large or small settings, that, we have a professional facilitator that's helping us do that. And then the last part of that is we're in, but repurpose and refocus our efforts in the Pasadena Unified School District to work with our students so that they better understand, and my officers better understand, what's it like to be a young black man pulled over by a police officer.
Terrifying.
And what's it like for an officer to pull over a young black man? Terrifying. Because what we know is that domestic violence and traffic stops are some of the highest fatalities where officers are killed. But I think that if we can get to that kind of dialogue and a greater understanding and grow our community-based policing philosophy, so when I'm driving down the street through community dialogue, I'm driving down the street and I go, hey, there's Mr. Farr. And Mr. Farr says, hey, there's Officer Sanchez. And be able to, hey, what's up? And that kind of thing, and then go about our business or whatever. So those are kind of the future things that we have planned for the police department, for our community. So more on that later. But at the end of the day, I recognize my responsibility to you, and I recognize my responsibility to the community. And those are not words to make you feel good.
No, I don't believe that. I mean, you by far you're very active and very visible. You don't shelter in place. So that, and I appreciate you taking time out to really just sit down and have this conversation with me. You said we've talked before. People have questions, people are talking, and there are certainly different sentiments that people are experiencing within the community. And we wanted to just provide this opportunity. So again, I do thank you this morning. And I know, like I said, we've maxed our time here. And one of the things on the conversation.live, we end every conversation with a copy, because at the end of the day, we're human beings. We want wellness for everybody. So again, thank you, Chief. Thank you to our live stream sponsor, William Preparian law firm, for today's support of today's live stream. So Chief Sanchez, thank you so much for joining us.
James, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Until we have another opportunity to speak again, Agape. Stand by, Chief.